This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 330.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. This season has been interesting, at least for me, where we've talked to a bunch of different people. We've talked to procurement gentlemen. We've talked to SE director or manager by the name of Bill Belnave. That was last week. We've talked to Evgeny, security engineer and now entrepreneur. We've talked to an AI-focused person. And we're back to talking to an SE director. We were talking to Malcolm Murphy with two L's. And we're going to be discussing his path into sales engineering directorship, as well as like the failures that he had to overcome. It was not a straight shot. Let's just put it that way. I learned a lot from Malcolm just having this conversation. I enjoyed talking to Malcolm. Easy to talk to. I hope you enjoy it as well. So let's jump into the show and let me know what you think. Mr. Murphy.
Ramsey.
How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you today?
I am hungry, but I think that's always the case. Which explains a lot. So, welcome to the show. Why do you spell your name with two L's?
I don't know. That's the way it's spelt. It's what's on my birth certificate. It's the way it's spelt. There's variations on the name. So there's Colm and there's Callum, which have the same roots apparently. So okay. I think it's something to do with that. But no, it's a common misspelling where people don't give me the second L.
Yeah, well, I just scheduled this thing with Malcolm without two L's, so yeah. I apologize about that. By the way, what is your name for the folks listening?
Yeah, so my name is Malcolm Murphy. I'm a sales engineering director for Mimecast here in the UK.
Okay. How did you become a sales director? Did you just wake up and you were a sales engineering director?
Oh God, no. So I'll give you So I actually started my career on the other side of the fence. I was a consumer of services. I worked for a nascent ISP in the UK in the mid to late 90s, and we bought lots and lots of hardware and software. One of our suppliers was Sun Microsystems, for those who remember them. And then I think it was probably 1999. I actually got into a conversation with them about joining, and I joined Sun as what they called systems engineer, pre-sales engineer, selling into service providers, so consulting on .com and so on and so forth. So that's how I got into sales engineering. And I, certainly at the time, against my better judgment, I got promoted to be a sales engineering manager. Despite having told my boss in the interview I didn't want to be a manager. Less than a year later, he said, "Have I got an offer for you?" And then through various ups, downs, and sideways moves across the time, I've ended up in a sales engineering director role.
Okay. That story about going from a consumer to Sun Microsystem is familiar to many companies, to many people. I interviewed a lady by the name of Sherry Maza, who's a SE director as well. Yeah. And she had a similar story where she was a consumer of Sun Microsystems and ended up being an SE and SE manager there.
Yeah. So I think it's a really powerful background to have for sales engineering, is to have been on the other side of the table, either as a user of the technology, so you can then go and speak with authority about use cases and outcomes and so on and so forth, but also, and this is one of the experiences I had, as a buyer of technology. So if I've bought software and hardware, it gives me insight into what buyers want when I'm having a sales conversation with them.
Actually, I had this conversation with one of my friends. He was asking me, like, what do you think about people becoming SEs straight out of university? So what do you think of SEs? What do you think of people becoming SEs straight out of university?
I don't think it's impossible, but I think you lack that experience. I think there's a bit... An SE if you're SE straight out of university, you can, don't necessarily say that you will always, but you can know the technology really, really well. What you'd have to work really hard to do is to understand how people use it and what benefits they get from it. So it's a shortcut. If you've actually done that job, that the guy over the table from you or the girl over the table from you is doing, then it's a lot easier to understand the pains and the challenges that they might have.
Yeah, I mean, there are some companies that offer like SE universities, or like they spend a year learning the technology and learning how to be SEs and why they should sell it. And in my mind, like that's okay.
Yeah.
But if most companies are bad at trading SEs, and if you hire an SE straight out of university, you are doing that person a disservice. They're gonna have to figure out everything on their own, which is.
I think go back to the statement you made there. Most companies are bad at it. So I think if you're doing straight out of college, then it's your responsibility as the organization to make sure you're equipping people with what they need, and that's not just product info. That's use cases and real understanding of how customers derive benefit from the products and solutions that you're offering.
Right. Well. That was not the topic of conversation today, but I'm glad you asked that question. One of the things that you mentioned to me while we were chatting last time was, well, actually, I want to step back. Why didn't you want to be a manager?
So in the first job that I had, so it was my first job out of university, and at university I'd got some experience, administering Unix systems and doing IT, and universities were where you got the internet experience in the early to mid 90s. So I got my job there, joined as a Unix systems administrator, and I got promoted there as well a couple of times. So when I left the service provider, I was running first line support for all of the data networks for one of the largest service providers in the UK, and second line support for a load of application systems as well, 24/7 operation in what was now, we'd been consumed by a proper telco, not just an ISP. And I was 26, 27 years old. And I was making it up as I went along. And what comes with that is an awful amount of pressure, because I was doing it by, working hard, not necessarily working smart. And I'd sort of not got into a corner, but I'd stopped enjoying what I was doing. I joined that role to play with the internet, and I was now taking on a lot of responsibility, and I didn't have the management competencies and skills to be able to do that well. I was just relying on what I could figure out naturally.
So just to be clear, when you say you were running the team, like running first line, second line, and third line support, you were managing teams of people.
So
and support is not like sales engineering. It's like,
no, it was break fix stuff. So it was like my internet doesn't work, and it wasn't. We had actually a zero line, a call center that would, my internet's not working. Okay, have you turned it off and on? When people were ringing us up and saying it's not working, it's like tens of thousands of people's internet wasn't working.
Yeah. And nobody calls support when they're happy.
No, they don't. We got very few thank yous. Quite a few. Can you fix this now, please? It would be most appreciated if you when you get round to it. That'll be nice.
That's very polite. I worked in support. No one ever said that to me.
No one ever said that to us either. I was joking.
Fix it. No.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you were to compare, so you didn't want to become an SE manager because of that.
Well, yes. So my basically what I felt at the time, and it's genuinely a function of I didn't have the management skills. So what I wanted to do at that point in my life was go back to be an individual contributor, and I was probably at my happiest in a data center with a half-built rack, literally cage nuts and SCSI cables and Ethernet cables, and crimping cables was a competency back then, to make sure they were the right length and the cable management was all nice. And that's where I felt I was going to be happiest. So that's what I said in the interview, because the interview question I was asked was, well, you're a manager right now, why would you come here and be a systems engineer? It's like, because I don't think I'm very good at management.
It's funny. Systems engineer is what SEs were called back in the day.
Back in the day.
Yeah. Well, not back 2014. I was called a systems engineer. So maybe not that. Oh man, I'm old.
That's 10 years ago.
Yeah, that is 10 years ago. By the way, I'm not leaking. This is just water.
Yeah.
In case anyone's wondering. Okay. So then you became an SE and you kind of got voluntold into an SE leadership role.
Correct.
You didn't want it because of previous experiences.
Yeah. So at that point, and I vividly remember the conversation, but at that point, I was presented, voluntold is a great way of framing it. And it's like, okay, make a decision. And the decision that I made in that moment was, okay, if you're going to go do this, figure out how to do it. And the advantage I had then was, Sun Microsystems was 40-ish thousand person company. The machinery was there to teach me to be a manager. So that's what I basically decided to do. Is the universe was telling me that it wanted me to go into management. I had to stop running away from it and figure out how to do it well.
So one of my friends, he was an SE, he was a manager for product verification team. In Canada, and he's since become an SE. And every time there's an opportunity for him to become an SE manager, he doesn't want it.
Right.
So I'm curious, like now that you've done management in both SE teams and your other company, like,
yep.
How do you compare the two roles? Like, because managers are managers, but is it?
Interestingly, I think that managers are managers. It's a whole separate debate of, if you're a skilled manager, what domain expertise do you need to be able? Do you need to have domain expertise in the team that you're managing in order to be a manager? That's a separate conversation, I think. There is actually some overlap in sales engineering management and that operational support role management, in the sense that there's often a lot of quote urgent unquote problems. So there's a certain amount of being an SE manager that is what I call juggler. So you're trying to do some sort of resource allocation and make sure the things that need to be covered do need to be covered. And part of it is your customers. There's lots of moving pieces. Even if someone commits to a meeting tomorrow at 2:00, there's a 50-50 chance that either gets moved or cancelled or delayed or whatever. The sales landscape is very, very dynamic. And so what the sales colleagues need from sales engineering and from sales engineering management is some confidence of being able to get stuff covered. So there's an element of that that's very similar to the operations role I was doing 100 million years ago. But then some of it's very, very different. So the thought around probably the thing that's very different in sales engineering compared to what I used to do a long time ago is the speed of change as well. So the need for sales engineers to keep current and to have time to sharpen their own skills and keep practicing for game day kind of idea. That constant treadmill of knowledge and enablement is different, I think, compared to what I used to do.
Okay. For some reason in my head, I'd imagined, because I worked in support, my management team, they were more focused on managing the tickets, making sure that they're supported.
Yeah.
Rather than becoming an SE, my manager's focus was enabling me to do the job, right? They're not worried about the opportunity per se. They're worried about all opportunities, but they're worried about making sure that I have the tools and the skills to manage the opportunities for them, because they can't manage every opportunity.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this story. It actually got me into trouble at the time. My boss didn't understand what I was doing, but we had severity, is that a severity 1 or severity 2? It was a reasonably significant outage that was happening in the in our network back in the day. I had 2 engineers working on the problem, and they knew more about the network and the bits. It had evolved over the 12 months since I was last hands-on with it. They knew more about what was going on. They had the call into the equipment vendor. We were waiting for a couple of things. And my contribution to this ticket was to go to the canteen and get the lunch for the guys, because the canteen was going to close.
Right.
So my assessment there was, I add no value by standing over their shoulder saying, press that button quicker, or asking every 30 seconds, has the vendor got back to you? I add value by saving the guys having the 15-minute walk down to the canteen and the 15-minute walk back, and just make sure they get fed. And it just so happened that my boss at the time walked by while this outage was happening. He said, "Where's Malcolm?" He's gone to the canteen. No one gave him all the context. So I get back and, why have you left your desk when there's this outage? We need you here to manage the ticket. It's like, the guys are going to do that work. I'm going to help them do what they need to do.
Yeah. I actually had the senior VP come and stand behind my desk as I was working on an outage.
Yeah.
And I just looked up and like, I'll call you when it's done.
Yeah.
He was not happy with me. I was like second year engineer.
Yeah.
Lowly. So yeah, it's annoying as an engineer to have someone just stand over your shoulder. But okay.
Yeah. So and that's what I try and do. And the teams that I've managed will tell me whether I've been successful or failed. Probably when this goes live, I'll get a load of emails saying, "You never did that for me." But what I've tried to do is exactly what you've said, is the success or failure that you have as a leader is a function of how well equipped your people are to do what they need to do at the point at which they need to do it. So like all of your work happens off the field, as it were, and in the customer meeting or with the partner or on the Zoom call. It's your teams have to stand or fall, and your success is how well equipped they are to be able to do that.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. So they're fairly similar in the sense that you need to enable the team. You need to let them do their job, and you're there to support them.
Yes.
So whether it's support or sales engineering or solution engineering or system engineering. Okay. And my understanding from the last time we talked about, it was a very easy transition for you to go from SE manager to director.
Well, no, no, it wasn't. Oh, I love the way you teed that up. No, so the first time I went for a director role, actually the first time, the second time maybe as well. I certainly the first time I didn't get it, and I was taken aback when I didn't get it. I honestly thought I was the strongest candidate. It was an internal pool. I don't think we looked at it external at the time. I certainly thought, hey, I'm the strongest candidate here, and it turns out that other people didn't think that, and it was a bit of a setback for me. Confidence took a bit of a knock, but when I'd stopped feeling sorry for myself, I took a step back and I looked around the organization. I looked at everybody who was one level higher than me in the organization, and I made a realization, which was that everybody, whether it was the sales engineering director, whether it was the support director, whether it was the sales director, every role that was one level higher than me certainly in the go-to-market organization, actually, and also in support, when I think about it, they had all had quota carrying experience. And the realization that I came to was that actually there must be something in the experience of carrying a quota that makes you more selectable for that second level management role, for that director role. So I made the decision that I was probably going to go out and acquire some quota carrying experience to enrich my skill set. Ramsey, I'm not hearing you.
That never happens.
No.
Edit that part out.
Yeah.
Talking to myself. So before we jump into the experience of going into sales, I'm curious. A lot of people get passed over for like a promotion, or whether from intermediate to senior, or from SE to SE manager. Before you went and looked about the reasons why, you said you felt sorry for yourself. How did you get, was the director now your manager?
Yes. Yeah.
So how did you, I don't know how I would deal with that. I wouldn't, I feel like, hey, I'm more qualified than him. I should have been an SE manager, or even if I'm not more qualified than him, I should have been an SE manager, director. Yeah. How did you handle that relationship for whatever amount of time you were there before you moved on to the sales role?
It helped that on a personal level, so it's a former peer, I was now reporting into a former peer, it helped that on a personal level, I really liked and actually admired the person who got the role. So in that point of view, it's easy. I think it's possible to hold both the two thoughts in mind, which is, one, that should be me, but two, you've got it, so I'm not going to be a thorn in your side. And my disappointment or residual anger at the selection decision that someone else made, that's not your fault. So I owe it to you as my, I'll say friend, but probably former friend. Now you're now my boss, so the relationship has to change. I owe it to you to continue to do what I am paid to do, and do it well, and not let my bitterness get in the way of the team's success.
Okay. Did the relationship have to change? Like, you can't be friends with your boss?
I think it does have to change. I think and I think this is a thing that happens whenever someone moves. Whenever two peers move to a manager team member relationship, there's things that the manager will know that they can't share. There's things that the team member will know that they shouldn't share. You've got to be conscious as a manager of optics and the way things look, just as much as you have about the way things are. So I've seen people make this mistake, actually, which is they've got a close friendship with a team member, and even though they are not breaking any confidences or playing favorites, the appearance is as powerful as the realities. And I think as a people manager, you've got to be alert to that, and you've got to make sure it's in your control to make sure that that doesn't happen. So sadly, I think 99 times out of 100, that does affect the personal relationship. I think it has to.
Okay. And in terms of going from holding both thoughts to making the decision, you know what, I'm going to support this SE director now.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to get to that realization or make that decision?
With the passage of time, I'll say it was a very short period of time. The truth is, it was many months. It wasn't easy. I mean, the truth is, I probably carried around that baggage even after I'd left. So it's, I was young, and I didn't have the worldly experience that I have now. So it's really difficult. And I think the bitterness of being passed over, particularly when it's the first time you go for something, right, it hurts. What I say to people now, bizarrely enough, well, not bizarrely, is now I actually view it as part of the process. I think if I had been successful that first time, I wouldn't be as strong now as I am. I think that failure and the steps I took in reaction to that failure make me a better leader today than I would otherwise have been.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense. Also, not having that feeling might not have pushed you to go elsewhere and get the experience.
Exactly.
And which was you went to sales. By the way, did that director have sales experience? Is that I don't want to like ruin your whole theory.
No, yeah, he did. He had
Okay.
he did have some commercial experience. Yeah, so that was part of the slow realization that I came to.
Okay. So how did you go transition into sales? Like I'm not talking about how did you get the job. I'm talking
Yeah.
like once you were in sales, it's fairly different from being an SE and an SE manager. How was that transition for you?
It was actually pretty difficult. If I look back, so what I did, it was actually the period. The intention was what I said to myself was I'll do a 5-year rotation carrying a quota. In actuality, it was 7 years I spent in sales rather than in sales engineering, and I had 3 different roles across that time. And if I look certainly at the first one, and probably at the second one as well, there were some sales competencies around, particularly around, say, qualification and pipeline management that I wasn't very good at. And a lot of mistakes were being made, certainly keeping opportunities going when they had no life in them. I grew myself a nice big pair of happy ears. I was afraid to ask prospects difficult questions around did they really need to do this and did they really need to do this now and what the cost of them not doing it would be. So I ended up doing, and because I'd come from a sales engineering background, I probably leapt to the product a little earlier in the sales cycle than ideally I should have. So it latched onto the first need that a prospect articulated. So, I can solve that. Right. Let me tell you how I'm going to solve that. Instead, what I would do now, obviously, is extract as much pain and suffering from the prospect as I possibly could before I articulate a solution. But in the early days, I was very reactive.
Okay. How did you overcome that? Like how did you figure out that that's wrong? Because most of us, no one tells us. We have to figure out. We have to be self-aware, and hopefully your answer is not. I was self-aware. So how did you figure out it was wrong, and then what did you do to fix it?
Well, it was born out of necessity. So the second role that I was doing, this sounds like a great problem to have. I was getting too many leads, and actually we called them leads. What I would call them now is inquiries. We're getting too many inquiries, and I was basically had very little in the way of support structure around me. So it was me and a laptop and deal with these as best you can. So I actually had to, because I genuinely couldn't respond to all the inquiries I was getting each day. So I put in place some automation that automation about responding to inquiries that came in, mostly forms on the website and email inquiries. So I put in place some automation to respond to those. And at first it was really scary because 40 or 50 inquiries would come in overnight. And then in the morning I send out my automated responses to them, and I'd get 1 or 2 responses out of that 40 or 50.
Right.
It's like, but now they were leads. And this is where, I called them all leads at the time, and I was worried about not following up on the other 48. But in reality, it was 48 inquiries, 1 or 2 leads. And that was suddenly manageable, and then of those one or two, so let's say 5 to 10 a week, half of those are probably going to go away as well. So you really it was born out of necessity. Too much to do, I couldn't possibly do it, and it was really very, very difficult to get comfortable with the notion that I was throwing stuff away. And I always had this real fear that there was some nugget in the ones that I'd discarded. So if I had spare capacity, I'd go back and try and revitalize them. So what I was actually doing, without realizing it, was basically doing a funnel management campaign and a lead prosecution campaign, and I was doing lead nurturing without knowing it.
I mean, it's interesting you say that. Most people would not do that. They would just email every single one and try to turn them all into leads. Like, at least that's what I think most people would do.
Yeah.
How did you decide to do the automation part?
Well, I think this is where, having been on the other side of the table and knowing that, and I'll freely admit this, there have been times in my other side of the table past where I would approach a vendor about some technology, not because I was intending to buy it, but because I wanted to learn something about it, or maybe I was approaching one vendor because I knew I was going to buy the other vendor, but I was required to do some due diligence, or sometimes say, hey, this looks cool. They'll if I sign up on their website, they'll give me a demo, right? So, it's 30 minutes of free education. And I'm a techie and I like playing with things. So knowing that that's what I would have done, and people I worked with did the same thing as well, so it wasn't just me, gave me, I won't say confidence, but I'll say reassurance that that's likely what was going on here. And it took me a little while to figure out. It's not like it's suddenly I woke up and said, right, I'll write this automation and it's perfect. It was a bit of tuning to say, okay, what are the qualification questions, or what are the, sometimes people say, oh, send me some information, and instantly the happy ears go off. Right, that's a hot lead. It's like, no, they just want the data sheet, and that's never going to go anywhere.
Do you have any SEs working with you at that time?
I had a slice of an SE. So it was a small company. So we sort of I had someone whose role was a bit post, a bit pre-sales, a bit product, a bit,
Okay. I find a lot of salespeople who go from SEs to sales, they tend to get frustrated with their SEs because they're not doing things the way they do it.
Yep.
How was your relationship with that slice of an SE?
I think it was really good. I have to say, and funnily enough, he's not in sales engineering anymore, but he and I still connect every so often over LinkedIn and have a chat. And I learned an awful lot from him about the technology domain. And the nice thing was that I'd moved into a product area where I didn't necessarily have loads of experience. So my SE knew a lot more than I did, both about the product, but also the technology area. And that ultimately helped me because it meant I had to depend on him for certain things. And I think he appreciated that I'd put a bit more of the guardrails and qualification around. So when I was coming to him with stuff, I think he appreciated that I was willing and able to take it so far. But that when I did come with him, it was reasonably qualified, and both that the opportunity was there and that he had unique skills or unique value to add above and beyond what I could do.
Okay. It just dawned on me that when you decided to go into sales, you moved out of your old company completely.
Yes.
Instead of trying to find an opportunity within that company, because you already know the products and you already know the people. How did that decision come about?
So I'd looked around. Obviously, I'd made the decision while I was still there, and I'd looked around, and it was a path that a lot of people took. So it was absolutely the case that people from sales engineering moved into sales, but to my observation, with about a 50% success rate. So some of the ones that did it very successfully, and there's some guy, actually, funnily enough, someone who was my sales engineer when I was a customer, is now, I think he's a pretty successful seller. But yeah, 50% success rate. That I felt like I wanted to tilt the table in my favor a bit more than that. And the observation I got was that the sales training, exactly as you said, hey, you know the products, here's a quota, off you go. And I, having gone through the experience and having seen, okay, you became a better manager for having access to management training and being disciplined about acquiring those skills. That also suggested to me that if I want to become a good salesperson, then I need to make sure I've tilted the table in my favor.
It doesn't sound like you did receive sales training though with the other company.
No, it doesn't. I think I probably bootstrapped myself a little bit there. The nice thing, I didn't receive, in the first one I went to, I didn't receive training as such, but it was such a small company, a small UK office. I got very good coaching and mentorship from our sales director. I got some very stiff talking tos from our sales director occasionally as well. But the guidance I got without ever sitting down doing something formal, the guidance I got in that first role was really useful. And that first role was essentially, it was big customer working. So I was working on one sales campaign for 12 months. So it was different to the second role, which was talking about 40 or 50 inquiries a day. It was a little bit more transactional, a little bit higher volume. So that they have different aspects of the sales role, and I was lucky to have those differences across the 3 different sales roles that I took.
Okay, and so you've done sales engineering, you've done sales. What are some of the skills that you had as an SE that transitioned well into sales?
I think the ability to what I did when I was an SE was I always, because I'd come from, say, the customer environment, when I was being an SE, I was always more concerned about making sure people understood what it can do and the outcome. Now, as an SE, I was quite operational about these things, and have you thought about this from an architectural point of view? But then as you pivot into sales, it's still thinking, okay, what value? How is this software going to make your life better? Or how's it going to be for the product that you're trying to build to sell to your customers? How does this software fit in, and what's the end result? So that bit is the same, and I think sales and sales engineering, one of the mistakes that sales engineers can make very much is to lose sight of that ultimate outcome. And if you think about the technical dimensions of a solution in isolation of the outcome, then you've lost something. So that was what I had as a sales engineer. I was always quite keen on what the success from the customer deploying the technology was going to look like. And that's the same perspective that a salesperson needs to have.
Okay. And right now, since you've been in sales and now you're back to a SE director, what are some of the sales skills that SEs should have but most avoid?
Well, I think the thing is, a lot of SEs, I think. Now, this might be. There's going to be someone listening to this now who goes, that's unfair. It's not a lot of SEs, but certainly a tendency. Some SEs are probably guilty of feeling like that sales is not what they're there for. So you hear it, and I have a conversation with people all the time. How do you introduce yourself? Hey, I'm the technical expert. Hey, I'm here to keep this guy honest. All of those things, which they're lighthearted. They're not necessarily too harmful, but it diminishes the purpose that you're there for as a sales engineer, which is ultimately your success or failure is determined by a purchase event. The person that you're talking to is going to procure the technology or service that your company sells. So if you take the view that that's nothing to do with you, I think you're under delivering to your organization. Now, that's not to say that you're doing the role of the salesperson, but that's the part that I see. And I come back to a mistake. I consider this a mistake that I made in my first year as a sales engineer, was when customers would ask me about price. And I knew what the price book was, but I would very proudly say, "Oh no, I don't get involved in the pricing." It's like, that's probably not the right answer. That's giving the wrong impression. I'm probably not going to give you a quote, but if you're asking me for ballpark figures or maybe how the pricing structure works, there's no reason why an SE shouldn't be able to do that. And certainly, I don't think it's good for an SE to proudly, as I did, declare that that's beneath me. Oh no, I'm an architect. I don't possibly deal with grubby things like money. No, we're all here for the purchase event.
Well, yeah, it's not just that. Like, from a pricing perspective, we're not working in ether. Like, as SEs, we have constraints that we have to solve problems within.
Exactly.
One of which is budget.
Exactly, and you're 1,000,000% right. One of the worst things that it's the role now of sales engineering in discounting product. There's no point. What I say to people is, there's no point designing a Rolls-Royce solution if the customer has a BMW budget, and that's one of the constraints that you need to operate within. And actually, I think people will say, okay, so the first order, level 100 skill here is, okay, ask the customer or get an understanding of what their budget is. Level 300 skill is understand the value of the outcome. So and that's where sales engineering having sales awareness can really, really help, because you can say, it's like if you go to a car dealership, right? You go to a car dealership and you say, I want that model there, and it's, let's say, for sake of argument, it's $45,000, and you say, hey, I've only got $37,000. The car dealership is going to say, okay, do you want to lose the air conditioning or the alloy wheels or the metallic paint? They've got options that they can take out of the solution to hit your price point. And I think that's a great example. I think they're very sophisticated at doing that. So, and then you as the buyer, you have to decide, actually, it's Florida. I really do need the air conditioning. Or I really like that paint color of paint. And it's the same for sales engineers. We've got to understand what's important for the customer, what's essential for the customer, what's nice to have, and design the solution accordingly.
Well, it's not just like, from the way I see it, like the car is kind of like, there is no ROI on a car, right? Toyota Camry can give you the same ROI as a BMW 320 or 500 series. They're going to get you from point A to point B. So if I go in with a budget, okay, we'll take some stuff out. But as an SE, I have the ability to discuss, your budget is 30K.
Yeah.
Right? But if we give you money back, like the ROI is going to be another 10K, would your budget be 35K now?
Yeah.
Right. So, and salespeople should not be talking about ROI. I know a lot of salespeople talk about ROI. No one believes them.
Yeah. I think I wouldn't go as far as say salespeople should not be talking about ROI. I think if you're going to go talk about ROI, you need more than just the ROI spreadsheet that your product people gave you.
The way I talk about ROI is I get the customer to tell me what their ROI is. Right?
Completely.
I ask the questions, but an SE talking about ROI and asking the questions has more weight than a salesperson whose job is to sell, right?
Yes, it does, and it comes back then to if that SE has got experience in the field that we're talking about and actually done a role similar to you over the other side of the table, then that's incredibly powerful when that comes together.
Yeah, I believe so. I am biased.
What's your background, Ramsey? How did
well, I transitioned to sales.
Oh.
I was in support, then did network design, then went into SE, then went on paternity leave. Then they said, "Congratulations, you're in sales." So that's 10 years of or 15 years of my career right there. But so that's the thing that I find lacking most SEs. Like my SE right now, although he's good and he is getting better, he would sit and not speak until he's asked a technical question. Where I'm pushing him, it's like, hey man, can you ask some questions that will help highlight some of the things that we do better than the competitor or whatever? So okay.
And I think that's another key thing, and it doesn't necessarily strike it as obvious as a learning from sales to take into sales engineering, but that probing and being willing to ask questions, you're not there just to respond to quote technical things unquote. I think about discovery and qualification. I think they're two different things, and I think there's a sales discovery and qualification, and I think there's a sales engineering discovery and qualification. So you could almost imagine a 2x2 quadrant of those two things, and sometimes the sales and the sales engineer will be in the same room, in the same call, but potentially would be on different calls as well. And I think you put it in a box labeled proactivity or ownership. As a sales engineer, you're not just responding to things that either the customer or your aligned salesperson tells you. You should be searching out information and triangulating different things and getting ahead of the buying process.
I mean, an SE should not be a chat GPT, a live form of chat GPT, right?
No.
You should be asking the questions as much as they're asking you questions.
Yeah, completely.
What else are SEs hesitant with sales stuff, do you think? Some, not a lot.
Some, not all. I think so the proactivity, I think, is a big one. I think the business outcome. I think there's understanding what the outcome might be, and I want to refer this back to the capabilities of the technology. Oftentimes, customers will ask a question: do you do X? Do you have Y feature? And the level 100 sales engineering answer is to say yes or no. Or yes, we have this feature and here's how it works. Let me show you a demo of that feature. Clearly, that's interesting to you. But the next, a better response is, okay, either you ask this question or you think it in your head, okay, why are they asking that? What do they want that feature for? What's it trying to do? Bear in mind that the prospect or customer probably isn't only talking to you, they're talking to other people. Has this question been planted by them, by the competition? And in those cases where you don't have the feature or the competition does it, quote, better, unquote, than you do, it's taking a flanking maneuver to say, okay, what are you trying to achieve? And actually the answer to the question isn't about the feature that you've asked me about. It's about the outcome that you think that feature is going to bring to you. So the ability mentally to try and predict or get to where that outcome is and take the customer or prospect with you on that journey is a really powerful skill. And that's, in my observation, that's a differentiator between average and good sales engineers and good and great ones, is the ability to, and the sales leader who I mentioned who gave me a lot of coaching in the first instance, he used the phrase, the question behind the question. Always understand the question behind the question and answer that one.
I love that, because if you think about business outcomes from a sales perspective, if you have the same features and the answer is yes,
Yeah.
now you're just fighting on price.
Yes.
If you understand the business value, now you can have a higher level conversation, and you don't necessarily have to fight on price. Now you
Yeah.
can talk about value and
And
ROI and all that.
and my experience as a buyer has been, there's been many cases where I've bought technology that, let's say by absolute measures wasn't the best, but I've bought the
Yep.
technology because the vendor understood what I was trying to achieve.
Yep.
And that de-risked my purchase, because I know they
Yes.
understand my outcome, and they've said, hey, here's an outcome for you. We know how to achieve this outcome. That's the path of least resistance for a buyer.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm not going to pay 17 times the price for that, but there's always going to be commercial negotiation around that. But that is a really powerful advantage that I think sales engineers I've worked with, talked to, managed, don't always understand how powerful that is.
Do you think SEs can become better as SEs without going into sales?
Of course, yeah. Of course, I don't think there's any one path that works, but I do think that if, as a sales engineer, you move into sales, I think there are two possible futures for you. You can do it as I did, which was I moved into sales with a deliberate intention of moving back into pre-sales and acquiring those skills and getting that rounded perspective. And I genuinely believe it's made me a better sales engineer, sales engineering leader from having that perspective. Or you can do it to go into sales, and sales is a more lucrative path than sales engineering if you do it well, and then build on the knowledge that you have from being a sales engineer, build on the fact that you've already been in that sales cycle, but then learn the other role of managing and leading the sales cycle and helping your customer drive change. And the sales engineering background can be a great stepping stone to that success. So I appreciate I haven't answered your question here. I don't think you need to have the sales rotation to I don't think it's the only way to get better at sales engineering, but I think find a way to understand those elements of the sales process that the salespeople own that you don't do today, and understand that. And however you get to understand that stuff, it'll be better. Salespeople do way more than open the meeting, buy lunch, and issue the quote. There's a lot more involved in being a good salesperson than that. I know when I was a sales engineer, I was quite dismissive about some of that stuff. I know I've worked with colleagues and friends and who have the same opinions, and that's not fair. Great sellers are doing an awful lot of work that sales engineers don't see. And I think if you understand what's needed in that part of the sales process and in the buying process, you'll become a way better sales engineer.
I agree with that. We're almost at the end of our time, Malcolm. Is there any questions you were hoping I was going to ask you, which I didn't? Or any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
The one thing we haven't spoken about is then how that sales experience compares to management experience, and actually how has it helped me and conscious of time, so I'll do the Cliff's Note.
I have time if you have time.
Okay, well we can do a little bit more. Hopefully the audience has time as well. I think that there's definitely two areas of benefit that I lean on or take advantage of for a sales engineering leader. I think one is that you see this now if you're reading stuff on LinkedIn or elsewhere, commentary in the general pre-sales or sales engineering literature, as it were. There's a lot of discussion right now as to the role of solutions. Is there a chief solutions officer, and is that a C-level role, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's, we don't have time to go into the thoughts around that, but it's an interesting discussion. I think the fact that we're even able to have that discussion is because there are now an increasing number of sales engineering leaders who've been in that sales world and can at least have the conversation at that level. What my company does, what your company does, what every company does, can be boiled down into two things. We make widgets and we sell them. So if you understand the selling part of that, that's half of the core competency of your company, and therefore your ability to contribute as a leader is increased by knowing more about that sales process. The second area that it's been really, really helpful is that, and I don't want to trivialize or suggest that this is easy, but as a sales engineering leader, you interface with sales leaders and you interface with individual contributor salespeople. And there is a credibility test that happens there. And I have found, my personal experiences, there have been instances where having had the specific experience, and when I'm talking with people who disagree with decisions that I'm making, but the fact that they know that I've lived some of their experience, that shortcuts some of the credibility conversation. So it has made some things easier. I remember one salesperson said to me, "Yeah, you're not just a wannabe SE leader." And yeah, he still disagreed with me, and we still argued for another 10, 15 minutes. But there was the conversation was a little more respectful than I think it would otherwise have been, and that means you're able to talk about the issues because you're not worrying about the personality.
So, well, here's a question on the flip side. Since you've been in sales for 7 years, and then you wanted to move back to an SE leadership role, you don't know the products that you're moving into. How does that affect your relationship with your SEs, considering, you've been a salesperson for the last 7 years?
So, you know what? I think it doesn't. Well, I take the view, and I don't know if this is still the appropriate time frame, but I reckon that even inside my company, whichever company it is, it'd be the same for you in your company, the product, I reckon the half-life of knowledge is about 2.5 to 3 years. So whatever I know today, in 3 years' time, half of it is redundant, and there's the other half I need to. So as a sales engineer, you're constantly on that treadmill. And quite frankly, as a sales engineering manager, even if I was an SE inside the company coming through the ranks, 3 years into management and I'm half out of date. Another 3 years, I'm half out of date again. The trick is, I think, as a sales engineering leader, I don't believe you need to know the product to the same level as your SEs. I think what you need to know is the outcomes. You need to know the processes. You need to be willing and able to understand the pressures and the processes of your customers. You need to be able to recognize what it is that the buyer needs from you. I don't need to know what color widget X is, or where the button for this is, or that stuff. I need to know what outcome are we delivering.
Which sounds very similar to sales.
It sounds very similar to sales. The difference, though, and because there's a follow-up question that says, okay, why can't salespeople become SE managers? I think it is an advantage to have a technical, if you like, credibility chip. So I don't know. I work for Mimecast today. I don't know the Mimecast product as well as any of my sales engineers, or probably any of my managers either. But where I do add value is I understand architecture, I understand technical concepts. I actually understand Mailflow quite well from my days working for an ISP. Turns out that hasn't changed too much. So I understand how things are put together. I understand architecture at a large scale. I understand technical concepts. And that technical thought process and a structured process is really good. But the other thing is, people value managers with management skills. If you think, I'd defy anybody to tell me the following statement isn't true. I'd sooner have a manager who manages really well than a manager who knows my product really well. I think any SE, if you think you'd sooner have a super SE as your manager rather than a great man manager, 99% of you are going to say you'd sooner have a great man manager. So my job as an SE leader is to be the best man manager, person leader that I can be.
Okay. Malcolm, anything you want to, any ask do you have of our audience?
Look, the thing about my career story is I got presented with that opportunity to take the management role. I was voluntold. I don't think there was much opportunity to say no. I think the takeaway from the story is the decision I made in that moment was, okay, if you're going to do this, then commit to it. So my ask for anybody here, anybody listening, anybody watching, is you think about your career. If you're going to do it, do it really well. Excellence is a choice. So figure out how to get a little bit better, next week than you were last week. Figure out how to embrace the things that you're not comfortable doing, but that are important to what you're doing. If you can do that a little bit, then your colleagues will thank you, your manager will thank you. Most importantly, your customers will thank you. So that's my ask.
I like that. All right, Malcolm. We're signing off.
Great talking with you as always. Speak to you soon.
And that's the end of the show. What are your takeaways? My biggest takeaway is sometimes failure is a path to success, right? Not sometimes. One of the things that he said is that if he had succeeded from the first get-go in becoming an SE manager, maybe he wouldn't have been a good SE manager or SE director. But because he failed, he had to do some self-reflection. He had to grow as a person. So failure leads to growth. And one of the things that I do, I have 3 kids, and I'm finding it, if they're not failing at something, either they're not challenging themselves enough, there might be other reasons, but the point becomes they get a big head. And you don't want a child with a big head. And you don't want a manager or a director with a big head as well. So failure is a good thing. It doesn't feel good in the moment. If there's a string of failures, it feels even worse. But that's not necessarily, I feel like it's setting you up for a better, more successful future. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much for being here. Like the show, leave a comment. If you haven't rated the show on Google, wherever people rate, I need to do some research where people rate podcasts these days. Anyways, if you know, rate it. And if you know, let me know. Maybe save me some time to do the research. With that, I'm signing off.